And I walked in to this gas station, and I'm wearing, so I got this new hoodie from ThinkGeek, actually. And the hoodie, they call it like a Starfleet tactical hoodie or whatever, and it's something that ThinkGeek themselves made, all right, that they devised on their own. It's not something that's actually in the Star Trek canon. But it looks like kind of a, later DS9, TNG movie style uniform with the gray along the top and all this. And it has a Starfleet patch on the right side. And then it has a little Starfleet patch, perhaps where the communicator should be. It's not, they didn't, I actually give them credit. They weren't cheesy enough to put, like a sew-on communicator there. Not that I have a problem with that. Sometimes that works. But in this case, I think it would have made it a little too cheesy. So I like what they did. They just had a little patch that said Starfleet. I mean, it looks a little military-ish, but whatever. So do most Starfleet uniforms. But man, I walk into this gas station, wearing this, and the woman at the counter, she says to me, when I get in line, I pick up some seltzer and whatever, and I walk in front of the line, and she says, "Hey there, Starfleet." Oh man, I mean, I can't do it. You know the way that only women can kind of say a certain thing. Oh, I thought it was the hottest thing. I went outside the gas station and I said to the lovely and hyper-intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy, and I told her what happened, and she goes, "Oh my God, that's hot." And I was like, I know. So anytime you want to call the Golden Stallion, anytime you want to call him Starfleet, you go right ahead. I dig it, baby. I thought it was fantastic. Oh man. Anyway, a lot of people really like that hoodie too. And if you're wondering, I shared some pictures of it on Twitter and, all over social media. And if you want one, ThinkGeek has them. So fortunately, I was, able to get my hands on that. And it was just, I don't ever want to take the damn thing off. It just looks so cool, and it's right on time because the weather is about to get serious enough to where you can wear a hoodie. And that's my favorite weather. It really, like, my favorite season's the winter. It's almost fall. Fall is almost, is a close second. But really the weather that I like is jacket weather. It's not necessarily the winter. It's not necessarily, I don't know, whatever term you want to put on it, just jacket weather. I love being able to wear a jacket. Now, I don't know if that comes from like just some old, I don't know, predilection to wear or like to carry things with me often enough. I was one of those teenagers where, every pocket I had something in it. This is before the smartphone could be everything. But, I had my little MacGyver knife, the Tinker, Victronics. But anyway, whatever. Enough of that crap. So I love jacket weather. There you have it. But that's not the question you came here for. Of course, we are here for another Q&A episode. Thank you so much to all the Sovereign Tech patrons for donating to the show and getting access to the Q&A. Of course, if you have not heard yet, if you have not figured it out, or if you're having any trouble with this, you can let me know right through the Patreon Messenger. But Patreon now has custom RSS feeds for patrons, which means that all of these secret, in fact, that's the name of the RSS feed that puts out these podcasts, is the Sovereign Tech Double Secret exclusive feed. Double secret. And yeah, I mean, to get access to that, you can get access to all this in your favorite podcast app, even on iTunes, whatever. You can just plug in that little URL and away you go. It's really, really slick. I love Patreon for putting that together. Now, again, we just got to get them to accept crypto, some cryptocurrencies, and we'll be in great shape. But anyway, so that is available if you want to listen to these in your favorite, podcast app. Now that is totally possible. And if you missed that ability or how to implement that ability, of course, just send me a message or an email, whatever, and I'll give you the hookup. So, and remember, everybody has a custom Patreon RSS feed. Like, it's not like there's just one that you can, I mean, you could give it to other people if you wanted to, and I'm not going to do anything about it. I don't believe in IP or any of that shit like that, and just pay what you want, and I'd hope they find value and want to donate anyway. But if you did do that, well, you did that. But once the patron stops being a patron, stops donating, then that RSS feed does get cut off. So, just something to keep in mind. But I think it's a very exciting venture in a lot of ways to monetize content, and certainly a whole hell of a lot better than, say, something like, Steam It or some of this other bullshit. that is really just, more about fattening the wallets of the, original people that created the platform and some of the original whales, instead of actually like really democratizing the ability to, fund, self-fund in ways, projects and all these other things. So anyway, speaking of Steam It, I have a debate coming up. I'll let Sovereign Tech patrons know. I have a debate coming up on the Tatiana show, of course, with Tatiana Moroz. I just love Tatiana. She's wonderful. And I will be on there, and I will be talking to Ned Scott and Dan Larimer. And it'll be, I plan on it being a pretty friendly debate, unless they're going to start, if they start tossing around the terms like that's crazy or what the hell do you want or things like this, well, then maybe it won't be so nice a debate. But that will be coming really, like I'll be recording that not long after this episode gets released. So, and if you notice, this is one of the first Q&As in a while, if maybe even the first one, where I'm actually in the studio doing it. But anyway, that's a whole bunch of, behind the curtain kind of stuff. But I just want you to know that that's on its way. Of course, you'll be able to listen to it for free through the Tatiana Moroz feed, or the Tatiana Show feed, and or the Let's Talk Bitcoin feed, because I think her show is on the Let's Talk Bitcoin network. But I'll also probably release it here in this feed as well for you to be able to access, just in case you don't want to go adding on another feed like that, which, it's up to you. Not to say Tatiana does a bad job, quite the opposite. But anyway, so let's get into these questions. We got some doozies here, and ones that I think really are filled with so much nuance that I kind of have to read every word of the questions. So, and we'll try to get through as many as we can. And I'll try not to be too verbose with any of them, but let's do it. Well, before I do it, I do want to say thank you so much to everybody for last week's Q&A episode. People were very supportive. People really appreciated what I had to say. And I'm really honored by that, because some of the subjects, especially, when you start talking about family, and sex and all these different things. Okay. It's a topic where, people get some very, very, very strong, and perhaps not so well researched opinions or whatever. I mean, people just have some very strong thoughts about the whole matter, and people can get pretty livid, but nobody did, as far as I can tell. There hasn't been any loss of donations of any kind. Everything seems to be, just fine and dandy and smooth. So anyway, let's really, so I do appreciate hearing from all of you, and what you had to say and your perspectives, on that whole topic. It's something worth talking about, something worth exploring. I really think so. So anyway, I'm glad everybody then enjoyed that. So let's get into some new stuff that we can enjoy. Let's start off with the first question here. Actually, I'm going to shake it up. Let's not go with that first question. Let's go with the first question that I have this like in two spots. Terrible move on my part. But the first question kind of follows a theme that we've been covering the past 2-3 weeks on the Q&A episodes. And this one has to do with, well, what I've kind of termed, tell us another Sovereign Tech secret. I got a message. Somebody used the Patreon messenger to get this to me. And they asked me, here it is. Hi, I have a quick question that I was wondering if you could answer sometime soon. After every episode that I've heard with the outro music / lines by Stephanie, the last thing she says is, welcome to the evolution. And this is on the regular, of course, he's referencing, on the regular Sovereign Tech episodes. And actually on these two, it ends off with, they're playing the Peter Gunn theme with Saliva, which I revealed that that's who plays that, on last week's Q&A. But it ends off with, where Stephanie says, like, this is copy heart. We encourage you to share, which I certainly do. And then it ends off with, welcome to the evolution, which I suppose is encouraging you to share. Well, I guess, using them in the Patreon episodes, since you can't exactly readily share those, you can share the fact, hey, you really need to get on Patreon to be able to listen to these. So that still fits. Anyway, but she says, welcome to the evolution. And reading out with the question, I've always wondered what that meant. Is it a pop culture reference, like, quote unquote, see you on the other side is, which we talked about that last week, or is there some deeper hidden meaning to it? Thanks, and keep up the good work. Well, again, thank you so much for donating and for being able to ask that question through the Patreon messenger. That makes my life very easy, and I do my best to get back with people as quickly as possible that use that. But anyway, to get to the question, welcome to the evolution. So there's long been in the liberty movement in general, or in, in liberty circles and all that. Like when there was the Ron Paul revolution or Lovolution, whatever they wanted to call it, like the word revolution, some people really took umbrage with, concerns over using the word revolution, even if you're talking about a peaceful, perhaps mental, or internal revolution, that happens for everybody, not something that's bloody or calls for violence of any kind. I generally don't, somebody says revolution. I like to think I'm a smart enough person to where I can get what they're saying if they're talking about doing something violent, which, don't misunderstand me. There are lots of people in liberty circles who absolutely support and claim that violent revolution is, viable. It's something, even perhaps that is coming soon. Those people are so full of shit. Like literally the shit is just pouring out of their ears. Just look at history alone. At a time when people were freer, had more capability, more personal power, personal empowerment, I guess I should say, a world without drones that can knock you off from, 2 miles away, no surveillance, or at least not a serious surveillance state, not one that actually, can be controlled by a small group of people, none of that. And even then, violent revolution didn't work. So, and people bring up the Bolsheviks. The Bolsheviks are no, they're not bullshit. It's a joke. But that is also another situation with a lot of nuance and also not necessarily something long lasting. Not really, so another area I'm a dilettante in is in the history of Russia, in the USSR. And at some point, I suppose I could talk about all that sort of thing. But, one thing people don't get is that even within the USSR, the history of the USSR, the October Revolution, all that stuff, there have been multiple USSRs. Like it is literally like the USSR had fundamentally changed 4 or 5 times throughout its history. There is no one way that the USSR, was. As to where, interestingly, I think America has always kind of just been America. It's always been rather, insidious, frankly. I don't think that there was actually a time where the U.S. Gave a shit about freedom. I think there was points where it was biding its time, to how much, how badly can it put its people on the leash? But that it's just always been that way. But the USSR actually had lots of really, really, I don't want to say minor, but it did have lots of little revolutions, and they weren't necessarily violent ones either, but that's all a whole other history, and not even really, what I wanted to get into with this question. But so when Stephanie says, welcome to the evolution. Anyway, I got on a huge sidetrack because I just get so sick of hearing people talk about violent revolution as being some kind of an answer to anything when it's not. So some people take umbrage. Like I said, some people, are skittish about the word revolution. I really appreciate that. And instead of like, welcome to the revolution, there's some other terms I use sometimes. I'll say, welcome to the cabal, because we are really on Sovryn Tech. We are talking about getting rid of legacy systems. I mean, we're talking about the future. I mean, a way of life maybe that hasn't, and I'm not centrally planning it. I'm not telling people how to live. I only ever talk about, okay, what gives you the most choices as a human being, on how to go about how you want to live. But we're really talking about, kind of the next step in human interaction. Human, for lack of a better word, society, things like this, where we're talking about individualism and all these things that aren't a part of, the order of the day today, really, in a lot of ways. So there's no real pop culture reference. Using the word evolution is just kind of a coy, not coy. It's just kind of a clever term to use to talk about, we're going to the next step. We're getting rid of the legacy systems. We're ignoring the legacy systems. We're ignoring the state. We're just going to evolve beyond that. Now, we're not, becoming a new species of humanity or anything. There's certainly people who make that kind of claim. Was it Lady Gaga's, was it Born This Way, where it opens up same DNA, but yeah, same DNA, but born this way. Like kind of like the whole song is this reference about how, yeah, I look human, but I'm not really human and all that. Well, that's getting into some wild esotericism that I won't get into here. But yeah, I mean, so there's some people who kind of think that way. And then, you know, you have people that talk about, oh, we're Homo interneticus, or Homo Deus that's the name of a new book that I haven't read yet, but I have on my list, where, you know, but I mean, understand, I've been saying welcome to the evolution since like episode 1 of Sovryn Tech. So this has been going on for years. It's not like it's something new that was inspired by some new book or anything at all. It's not. Yeah, it's really just, I think one of the terms that's been used by some other liberty media is not revolution, but the peaceful evolution is what they would say. And I really like that. I agree. I mean, you know, because we're not fighting in any wars here, really. Okay. We're just evolving. We're just taking it to the next level, you know, of you know, peaceful coexistence. Which is, you know, in my opinion, one of the real goals of life is just, you know, to learn and have peaceful coexistence. So yeah, nothing, you know, nothing really, no big story to tell there. I'm sure people would love if there was some great pop culture reference involved, kind of like with the Stargate one, would you know, with "See You on the Other Side." But in this case, there isn't. In this case, it was the best word to describe kind of what I feel like I was talking about, or what I do talk about. But, you know, I'm in no way saying, also, let me be clear, I am in no way saying, you know, with you know, welcome to the evolution, like Sovryn Tech is this great bastion of light, you know, or it's this amazing, like, this is the path to take. You know, I wouldn't claim that for 2 seconds. In fact, you know, I'll tell you, wow, 3 years ago, maybe, there was a lot of people, and this is before, you know, I kind of challenge you. In fact, I was doing it the other day. I went back and I listened to like episode 41, I think, of Sovryn Tech. I can't remember why I was even doing it, but I went back and I listened to it, and like, I talk so slow and I talk so soft, and like, I can't believe that's me. You know, as where normally I'm coming out with the woo, you know, and all the intensity and everything. And it was just so like calm. I almost missed that. I was like, wow, that's a hell of a guy right there. But anyway, even at that point where I'd like to think that, you know, I wasn't being so debonair on the air, but I had people emailing me saying that I needed to come up with my own ism, my own philosophy, and all this stuff. And I've talked about this to some degree even recently in past episodes. And I was like, no, I don't want anything of the sort. I'm not telling you how to, you know, I'm not telling you how to live. I'm not micromanaging anybody's lives and all this stuff like a lot of, you know, ANCAPs and some others do, where it's like contracts, contract up, you know, none of that bullshit. You know, I don't play that game. And I have no interest in politics. I mean, like, I don't want it. I am not interested in that sort of thing. I've toyed recently just because of my utter disgust with libertarians and a lot of anarchists in general. I've toyed with, you know, messing around with another word, but it's just toying. It's nothing, you know, it's nothing serious, like, or at least it's not anything. Yeah, it's not something I'm really gonna talk about. I mean, I guess if people ask me about it, maybe I'd talk about it a bit more. But anyway. So yeah, welcome to the evolution. Nothing special there, but I'll let you in on a little something extra. And I don't know if I've mentioned this before. I think I might have mentioned this before, but there was a time where I was purposely making sure that, and I do whatever compression trick I needed to do, making sure that each episode of Sovryn Tech was, as long as it was a 2-hour episode, was 69 megs. And then it's painfully obvious why I would do that. So anyway, there's another little secret. I have many more that I have, you know, implemented into Sovryn Tech, that if people want to, you know, maybe ask if they thought they found one, I'll let you know if you've found something. Welcome to the evolution. I mean, yeah, you kind of found something there. I even, you know, to some degree that is a play, I guess. And I don't know that I really thought about it that much, but to some degree it is a play on some degree of esotericism and maybe even Illuminati stuff, where that's what they're talking about, where they are going to become, you know, the next evolution of humanity, you know, the perfectibility, you know what I mean? And, but yeah, I mean, it's a good term to use either way, whether you're dalliancing with that stuff or you're not. So, okay. That's enough of that one. There we go. No, we're doing good. 20 minutes. Okay. Let's go on to the next question. And this is a tech one. So kind of, I like this little pattern that we've been developing sort of spontaneously on the Q&A episodes. Hey, Brian, you had already mentioned it on your show, but in the last day or two, FBI director, and I got this message just recently, FBI director came out and urged everyone to tape up their laptop camera. What do you think he knows that we don't? It's supposedly to protect us from crackers, that being malicious hackers for those that don't know how I use the term cracker. Now, if there's one thing the government doesn't like, it's competition. So they want to see the crackers lose out. That's fine. But that has to mean they not only have other ways to spy on us, but have perfected it enough to allow them to warn the public about the cameras, to throw us off the scent and get a false sense of security. Am I a crazy conspiracy kook for thinking this? Now, I really appreciate the use of the word conspiracy kook. That's pretty good. That might be better than what I use, conspiracy nutters, because I think using the term conspiracy theorist, as we talked about recently, like with the iPhone 7 and the, with Jackgate, the headphone jack being removed and everything, they said anybody who thinks that's all about, DRM management or, DRM hardware and software and whatever else that they're conspiracy theorists. And I said that was really appalling of Apple to use that term, because that is a term used to shut down conversation. That's a term to, just scorn and really whoever is talking about this, oh, you're just a conspiracy theorist. And I've actually been privy to the conversations where someone will complain about the DRM, the tyrannical potential control that Apple will have, via the DRM of, the Lightning port, and someone saying to them, you're a conspiracy theorist, and just like ending the conversation like that and just repeating themselves over, you're a conspiracy theorist, you're a conspiracy theorist. There's no argument. That's not, I hate to use this phrase because it gets used by a lot of people that are assholes, but it's not an argument. Okay. And I mean, and honestly, you're only paranoid if you're wrong. And the iPhone 7 just came out a couple days ago. We've got some time to find out if the people concerned about the DRM with the Lightning port, to find out if they're right. And I bet we're going to end up being right, because I'm certainly one of those people that thinks, Apple is doing this as a system of control, and not just because they needed more room, in the iPhone, because I don't think they really needed that room. But anyway, so back to the point here with the question, which is, does the fact that now that the FBI is effectively recommending people cover their webcams, does this mean that the FBI or whatever alphabet soup organization now has various other ways within which to, spy on people, at large? And yeah, I think there's some truth to that. I don't think that's a conspiracy kook idea. I do think they do have a lot of other ways to really spy on you. I mean, for one, like the laptop, the computer in general has really fallen out of favor as the system that the average person uses the most times, throughout the day. And not a lot of people, and in fact, the design of them doesn't really make this, terribly plausible, but not a lot of people are, using tape over their smartphones, and nobody's recommending to do that, right? Nobody's saying, oh yeah, put tape over the camera on your smartphone. Oh, no. They're not recommending that. So I think to some degree, they've realized that, well, we don't really need to look at laptop cameras anymore. We can just use everybody's smartphone, kind of like, what was it in, The Dark Knight Returns, right? The Batman movie there, the second one of Christopher Nolan's trilogy. In The Dark Knight Returns, where there was kind of a sonar that could be used, and Batman could figure out where exactly, the Joker was and all this. I mean, to say nothing of how insidious, that whole scene is, of somehow making it like, okay, like I love how Lucius Fox, says this is completely unethical, blah, 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 but they do it anyway because, we got to stop the Joker. Isn't that the age old government argument, and how insulting for the character of Batman, to be used, in that fashion in a pop culture, medium like the movie The Dark Knight Rises, but whatever. So yeah, I think that they know they can just use smartphones, and that smartphones are far better, far easier, with which to make use of the cameras in all of this. And, this gets into it. This raises a huge problem in that, and it's not a new one to Sovereign Tech listeners, but that you can choose not to have a smartphone. And I think that's a fine and dandy thing. I mean, I want to see the opposite of what we're talking about here, where people get away from the smartphone and start going back to the laptop. But that's not the direction things are going. Instead, they're trying to either get you into glorified smartphones like tablets, or they just want you using smartphones in general. But with smartphones, yeah, you could choose not to have one, but then, you've got 100 people at least around you at any given moment, perhaps, that does have a smartphone, and that can be used to still kind of, target you, perhaps, potentially. Like I've always said, if the NSA is really after you, or the FBI, the CIA, whatever, is really after you, you're screwed. I mean, you can hide things from the get-go maybe, and, hopefully no one will ever be the wiser. But if the sights are on you, I don't think there's much you can do. I don't think there's much in the way of any technology that you can use, to really, get away from their prying eye. If you're being targeted. Otherwise, yeah, I think you could disappear. but if you're being targeted, if they know what that's kind of game over. There's another possibility here that I want to discuss. But yeah, so I mean, the reason, what is their superior technology to where they're not concerned about laptops anymore? I think the superior technology is, the new avenue that they're using to track you and, to be able to see you in all of this instead of using a laptop camera, is the smartphone. Like I think it's really just that simple. But as far as there's another possibility here, perhaps what some would consider maybe a more rational one, but I don't think there's anything irrational about what we just described when you look at the various Snowden revelations. And before anybody asks, I will go see the Snowden movie at some point, and I will do a review of it. So yes, I'm well aware, and I'll be on top of it as soon as I can. So the other possibility is that something I've mentioned a few times now recently on Sovereign Tech is this concept that there's really only 3 countries in the world. There's Russia, there's China, and then there's everything else, which is effectively America, even if it has another name. With that in mind, and when you consider things like a few years ago when Joe Biden said, watch out for ZTE and highway, devices because they are under control of the Chinese government and they will be spying on you. It's just as plausible that, and it could be both. It could be, a mixture of the two, that what's really happening is the FBI is warning against, laptop cameras because they are concerned that China or Russia is looking in. And when you consider all of the, the various leaks that are going on with the Hillary Clinton emails and all this stuff, and the potential, I'm not saying I know that it's so, but and the potential that that was being done by Russian hackers or even the Russian government or however it's happening, that they are afraid of more attack vectors that, either China or Russia could use against the United States, or should I say Western interests, and I don't say Western with any kind of praise at all. I think Western civilization is disgusting, but yeah. So, I think that's just as possible is that, or again, it could be both, is that the FBI is genuinely concerned about, other countries looking in. Now, the irony in all that is that they're the ones leaving open the back doors. They're the ones that have fucked the system for so long, like the NSA working very closely with a lot of operating system manufacturers and all that, to where I think that there are 0 days and back doors built in that, other nation states, other actors are taking advantage of. And, the U.S. put them there as to where, companies could have been building incredibly secure. There's always going to be, or I don't want to say this isn't a carte blanche statement. There's always going to be 0 days. I'm not saying that's always going to be true. I'm just saying that there's always going to be zero. And you get my point. There's always going to be 0 days. But you could still have created far more secure systems if, there weren't all these back doors and all this bullshit built into everything. Or if, they weren't using, various tactics that create more back doors and all that. So, if it's that case, I mean, they have no one to blame but themselves. They created the insecure, infrastructure that potentially, these other actors could take advantage of. So yeah, I don't think it's crazy to say that they have a better system. They do. I think it's smartphones. But also there's the potential that they are genuinely concerned about their own safety in that, other nation states or other actors are making use of this, and are spying, who's watching the watchers. Well, it could be China or Russia or something like that. Not that I give two rats asses about politics or anything along those lines. I really don't. That is a game for them to deal with. And, I stay out of it. I wish it was a game that didn't exist, but anyway, so I think that, that answers that one pretty satisfactorily. So let's see. I think I could do one more tech question, and then maybe we can get into a fun one at the end. Let's read this one here. Sorry for what is a tired question in the cryptocurrency space, I'm sure, but what's the best way to store larger and long-term amounts of Bitcoin? I've been in the space for a few years and have yet to learn of a satisfying answer. When people first tried to tell me that paper wallets were the way to go, I literally couldn't believe that anyone could suggest that with a straight face, and not because of the irony of two opposite techs coming together. Now we have hardware wallets, but from what I can tell, they could still use some work too. The reason I don't like any of the solutions so far is that none of them seem to truly take into account either the fallibility of humans or our need to avoid long-term stress. I lose, break, forget, and generally fuck all sorts of things up on a daily basis. Why? Because I'm alive. That's what humans do. Right on. And so I don't want to live in constant fear that my money is in jeopardy of disappearing because of me or someone else. I agree with Andreas Antonopoulos that some of the most needed tech in cryptocurrencies is design, UI, hardware, software, etc. Aside from privacy features, that is. So with all of that, it's okay to say that there are no real answers yet. I just wanted to get your take and also to see if you have any insights into any upcoming tech. Thanks. So you kind of hit it already. There isn't like a necessarily perfect answer. There are concerns, to be had with paper wallets. I mean, with having to do with printers. And I mean, there's a whole bunch of other things. In fact, Andreas Antonopoulos, at one point he was running a paper wallet business. So it was one of his first ventures, when Bitcoin kind of hit the scene. And yeah, I remember his instructions would say, okay, make sure, he'd have you boot into, a version of Ubuntu off of a disk that he would send you in the mail. And then he would say, in the instructions it would say, do not connect to the internet. Don't have anything connected to the internet and all this stuff, but I mean, the idea is that that's, those are the levels of paranoia. And I'm not saying paranoia is a bad thing here. Those are the levels of paranoia you have to go through to really, try, even attempt to have a secure paper wallet. Which a lot of people say is the go-to thing. And often, I've recommended it as well, but more for different reasons other than, just straight up security. I think there's other reasons to go for it. That being because like at the time when I would recommend paper wallets, it was more about, we had was it Insta Wallet? Was it Insta Wallet? Was that I think Insta Wallet was that classic web-based wallet where all you had to know was the URL and that would get you into it and everything. And then there was a gigantic Insta Wallet hack. This was like 2-3 years ago. But I recommended paper wallets kind of just because of that, not to say that, paper wallets are somehow infallible. But anyway, so yeah, there's hardware wallets. There's Ledger, the Ledger wallet, and Trezor. Both of which are coming out with new models of what they do. And they're kind of interesting. But there really isn't a great answer on how to go, about having like a truly secure wallet. My favorite, and it's been my favorite, and it's something I've recommended for some time. I mean, I don't talk about it much. So if you don't remember me talking about it, or if you didn't hear it, because the last time I mentioned it was years ago, obviously that's fine. I don't expect people to remember everything I say. And I sure as hell don't expect everybody to listen to every episode of Sovereign Tech. Speaking of that, now we have episode 200 coming up very soon. Technically, though, it's going to be episode 300, literally. So there's a lot of Sovereign Tech out there. But anyway, so the one I've recommended often doing, and this is sort of an offshoot of my Dark Android project. And that is I would put, I would have take whatever loose phone you've got. Okay. And this is sort of a hybrid idea of a paper wallet. Anyway, I would take a phone. Okay. And I wouldn't have it really connect to the internet or anything like that. I would sideload, okay, an APK. I tried to do that securely. Okay. I put on this old phone, I'd put on CyanogenMod or maybe even, that's terrible. I can't think of not Redroid, Replicant. Yeah. Replicant is the name of like the really open source Android based operating system. I'd put like Replicant or something like that. Get an old Nexus phone. Cause you can toss anything on those and, kill the Wi-Fi on it, kill everything on it. All right. And just communicate with that. Make that your hardware wallet and only communicate with QR codes from that hardware wallet, that phone being your hardware wallet. Make it an older phone that can do a removable battery and, and all of this. That way you could just pull the battery when you're done. And then you more or less know it's not going to go anywhere. You could put it into a little Mylar bag, if you want to go really paranoid. But I think, repurposing old Android devices, especially like Nexus devices, and turning them into their own hardware wallets that, again, do not communicate outside of perhaps, using QR codes to read back and forth, sending stuff off. I mean, and sideload like Mycelium wallet or something like that, because that's a team that I have a degree of confidence in, is the team at Mycelium. That's really kind of the best solution I would think of where to go. The real solution is to anonymize, the user, to anonymize the Bitcoin holder. And technologies like Zcash, which Zcash isn't Bitcoin, but things like that to where you really, really anonymize, the endpoints. That's a huge solution right there, because if you effectively can't trace, like the point of origin, who's going to come after you, what you're looking for. I mean, and they have, I'm not going to give away a bunch of details on this because, we'll talk more about that in the future. But there are ways to really set up a cryptocurrency that could solve a lot of these, very, very simple concerns there's a huge industry right now, and you can go to all the Bitcoin news sites, Coin Journal, Bitcoin Magazine, Cointelegraph, Bitcoinist, CoinDesk. I mean, or Crypto Coins News or whatever. I mean, there's tons of them. You could go to a lot of these, and most of them will tell you about some new project getting funded, not something that's going to enhance, the Bitcoin network, but they are companies with the specific mission of de-anonymizing the Bitcoin network, of tracing the Bitcoin network, mapping it to know where everything came from and all that. I mean, and there's a ton of money getting put into these businesses that are coming up, and their whole purpose is to ruin what made Bitcoin so attractive for so many people. And obviously why a lot of people are running off to Monero right now, and who I also think will run off to Zcash, once its chops are proven. Yeah, there isn't a great answer, and a lot of the reasons there isn't a great answer is just in the nature, some degree of Bitcoin itself, that a lot of this stuff is possible. But hopefully, other cryptocurrencies will kind of solve it. But there's a chance that there's points within Bitcoin to where they could solve this issue too. Side chains might be able to make. I could envision a side chain where, and I know I've talked to the companies that are working on side chains. I've talked to people there, and they talk about the fact that, they're going to make side chains where it is a very secure store of something happening, or where they will implement, more anonymous features on these side chains. Now, side chains, I'm a little skeptical of them. They still need to be proven a bit more, because I have concerns over security, especially at the points, at the gateways, at the points to where either they leave or they enter, re-enter the, the Bitcoin blockchain. But I could see side chains coming out that could also solve this issue, to where you have a side chain that is like cold storage. Like literally that is the purpose of it, super secure, anonymous cold storage of Bitcoin. And then those Bitcoin can just, re-enter as needed. So that's where I think, a lot of solutions will come from. But anyway, at the end of the day, my recommendation, my favorite, hardcore, wallet style to secure my wealth, or not my wealth, but to secure my Bitcoin anyway, is to sideload mycelium onto a Android device running Replicant or CyanogenMod or one of those. Kill the radios on that damn thing. Only have it communicate with via QR code. Toss it in a Mylar bag, go all the way. And make sure nothing ever looks at that. Have it with a removable battery, and all of this. And I mean, you don't want to just leave the battery out. You probably want to, check on it every week or so. But that's my favorite way to really secure things. And I think it's, in many ways, it's just as good, in fact, I say it's better than anything Trezor or like Ledger, or some of these other guys who are doing important work. I'm not knocking them at all, but I think this is the really great extreme way to go about it. So I hope that answers that question. I don't know a whole lot of people that talk about doing that. I think there's like even a business opportunity, but so here's the thing with this. Okay. And this is actually an issue with a lot of these like crypto cards or like wallet cards that you can make for Bitcoin and other cryptos. Is that to some degree when you're selling a physical product that is going to store, value like Bitcoin, to some degree, you have to trust the manufacturer, like with Cassatius coins. Okay. For example, with Cassatius coins, which were the physical Bitcoins that underneath had, a private key. And a lot of people brought up the very real concern is that how do we know the guy that made Cassatius coins didn't keep the private key and could eventually, just cash them all out, and he made the money off of selling you the Cassatius coins, to where one of them is worth 1 Bitcoin and you could get a bar that's worth 25 Bitcoins and all this. Well, the point is that people did trust the guy. And that's what you needed, So I've always wanted there to be a business that would sell kind of these pre-built, no radio Android, Android based wallets, that maybe would have mycelium already built onto them, and all of this. But you'd have to trust the person giving you that, that's the thing when you buy it. And I don't expect you to trust anybody, and I don't recommend you do. This is real money we're talking about here. Is in large amounts, and is in the fact that Bitcoin is is absolutely legitimate, even though you don't, I'm careful with that word, legitimacy. I don't mean in the way of governments. I mean in that other people, really see value in it. So yeah, you're never going to see a business that I think would allow for that. Even if, maybe if there was like a third party that verified or at least a couple third parties, and everything was completely open source, and a couple of third parties, really verified, what was going on with it and what was being done with it. And then you trusted perhaps those third parties to do the audit. Then you could have a business like that, but it just seems like a big headache of a work. So do it on your own. Get an old Android device, wipe the thing to no fucking end, throw Replicant or CyanogenMod on it. And then, maybe you could even run, I don't know if I'd do this. I was going to say, maybe you could run like an LTS version of Ubuntu on one of these on a phone or on a tablet. And this could all be done with tablets too. And then you could throw maybe Electrum on there, which I think is a fine idea. And then, just lock the damn thing away, and never, ever have it connect, do not connect to the internet. Just don't. Just have everything operate through QR codes. Communicating back and forth with each other. So anyway, that's my recommendation for all of that. I think that's a great question, and it's one. This is the thing. Bitcoin, the base, not that that's a basic question at all, but the basics of Bitcoin and the fundamentals, I think is the better term to use here. The fundamentals of Bitcoin, the fundamentals of Bitcoin security, the fundamentals of Bitcoin use, those need to be re-examined all the time. And that's a good thing, because that means that the space is growing and, and that change is happening. And, it's a fine thing for this. So I think it's great to ask these kind of questions, every 6 months, every year, or even in a shorter span of time. So great question. I really appreciated that. Let's see. I had a couple other really, really good questions that I wanted to get into. Yeah, so we got a little while before we hit the hour mark, even though I always wanted these episodes to be shorter than that. But here's the question. At Sovryn Tech, do you think that geek and nerd culture has become less authentic and more corporatized over the past 20 years? Cool. Definitely like to hear your analysis on the subject. I know you'll have some unique things to say about it. I think it's become trendy for everyone to be a nerd, quote unquote nerd, but many self-proclaimed nerds don't make the commitment to nerdy things, quote unquote. And it seems that acceptance of nerds in some people's minds means it's okay to accept all nerds, including ones who are jerks. Yeah, so that's an interesting question. Has it become more, corporatized? Has it become less authentic? Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, you can say that, and we like to talk geeky things here. I mean, pretty much every last question, or not always, but a lot of the last questions during Q&As have been geeky. Yeah, I mean, you could say that that any movement, any counterculture, any subculture, eventually becomes kind of corporatized. Eventually becomes, very inauthentic and all this. And maybe that's true, but I don't think that has to be true. I think there's some things that you can't really, again, for lack of a better term, corporatize. You can't really turn into a cookie cutter model. For example, I think a lot of what we talk about on Sovryn Tech, does not, is not, corporations, marketers and a lot of this different stuff. I don't think they know what to do with it. Same with things like the Free Software Foundation. This is an organization, the Free Software Foundation, does so much for, the open source movement, computing in general and everything. I mean, it's just one of the most important organizations in the world today. And, I think you can make it sexy, but you cannot make that sort of thing sexy. It's not something that sells very well, as in like it gets a bunch of people on board with it because, instantly they start thinking about free software. They start thinking about, GNU Linux, right? You have to say it that way. They start thinking about all these things and go, that's hard, and they just don't go, they can't do it and they don't want to do it and they want nothing to do with it. So again, but that is a subculture. Like I think in many ways, the open source movement in computing is absolutely a subculture. But it's not something that scales or really, I mean, it can scale, but it's not something that sells very well. Not really. Not until the time, until like Bitcoin came around to where you were literally attaching, open source money. Until you were attaching money to the whole idea, then suddenly, oh yeah, we can do this. We can do Ethereum, which I mean, talk about, inauthentic and corporatized. But that's a different story. Then things, because then there's money already, baked in and involved, and then people can get on top of it. So yeah, it's been corporatized. I have a few theories as to how and why it really happened. I think it really didn't become a really big deal until, I talk about this with music. One of the worst things, and I know I'll get shit for this, but bear with me. One of the worst things I think that has ever happened to music in the history of humanity is the band called Nirvana. In the late 80s, early 90s, up until like 93, humanity was on such a high note. Is literally and figuratively with music to where things were like, really like, very sexy, very kind of happy-go-lucky, had a nice intensity to it. Things were about living the good life. And then Nirvana comes out and amazingly, the economy went right down with it. I mean, it really did. To where, suddenly everything's depressing. Oh, shoot me. I want to die. The life is terrible. Let me take some drugs. This whole thing, happened. And then, of course, even that people were able to, that music scene, the whole grunge scene, the music companies swooped in on that one too. Right. And turned it into, turned it into Silverchair and, and all this other bullshit, bullshit music from the time, a lot of Me Too bands. So Nirvana was, this focal point where it was a pivot point actually, where suddenly whatever was hot in the industry completely shifted, and went another direction. I think the same thing happened with nerd culture, or happened with entertainment in general, with maybe Iron Man might be the first really like, was it 2005, whenever the first Iron Man movie came out, with Robert Downey Jr. That was when suddenly, holy shit, this made a ton of money. We're going to pivot, as an industry, and we're going to start concentrating on this. And I think that's when it really happened. That's when like being a nerd and all this stuff really, really popped. Because they saw the money, they made the money, off of Iron Man and off of, now off of all the Marvel movies, which really are, comic book movies are so boring. They are so predictable. They are so safe. They have this similar formula. It's true for the bulk of the industry, but that's really kind of when nerddom, kind of came into the mainstream. I think, just like when, Nirvana is what killed real talent in the music industry. Iron Man is what like killed kind of, I think in many ways, real geeky culture, where like, and what I mean by real geeky culture, and, this is going to get crazy because it's like a no true Scotsman thing. The thing I feel that defined, geek and nerd media, entertainment content was that you had to know a little something. Like you had to have some degree of knowledge of the world, or at least you had to have a great imagination to be able to keep up and understand what's going on. Now, obviously that does not appeal to a large segment of, of the world, because most people are just stupid. Okay. But there was always enough to where, generally if a person reads books, they already kind of fit into that category. So science fiction, albeit the bastard, and it had been called that for, decades, albeit the bastard stepchild of, literary fiction, it was still, in the realm of the intellectual. And so, people would read, and, it could make fair money. If it was just good enough. Or if it took advantage, perhaps, of the Dungeons and Dragons scene, you could make pretty good money off of doing that sort of thing. Or you end up with alternative history, all this different stuff that has audiences. And, they got it down to the point to where they knew just how many they needed to print, or you could do second and third printings and all this stuff. And it was a very cost effective, medium to get out there, that being books and all this. Now, it's quite the opposite. Now, so much money gets funneled into, like with a movie, it's different than it is with the book, as to where with a book, yeah, you can pay for the book, you can pay the author, you can give them the royalties, give them their advance, whatever. But the book, you can, there's not a lot of, you don't have to put a whole lot of money down to make a book a thing. And you could really control the supply, or, you could keep up with the supply and demand, all right, of book sales. As to where movies, that's not the case. Movies, no, when you make a movie today, you're like creating a small nation. Okay. When you do that, and you're going to have to lay out, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, or millions, I should say, not hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. Eventually we'll have the $1 billion movie at some point, I'm sure, at the rate that things are going. And in so doing, you have to recoup that cost. So you have to make these movies appeal to the, broadest audience possible. You have to dumb down the content. And that's where the inauthenticity comes in. And that's where all these people, this is why you feel like, it's like, well, nerds seem like they're not so much today. Kind of like, the messenger was saying there. The questioner was making that point. Yeah, they don't really have to know their nerd stuff, because there's no requirement to enjoy what gets labeled or what would have been nerd stuff, 20 years ago, because it's all dumbed down to get the lowest, to the lowest common denominator, as to where previously science fiction and even fantasy to some degree, and some of this other stuff was doing the exact opposite. It was, hyper focused on the intellectual, hyper focused on people that weren't stupid. On people that understood, that could follow complexity, that could grasp, some complex ideas, and things like this. It started before Iron Man. Like, you could watch the Sci-Fi Channel to really kind of see the very terrible progression, how that station went from being the greatest thing in history, like in 1998 and 99, where it was at a high point of just, putting out the best content you could imagine and, having like, great marathons and all this wild stuff. And then suddenly it just all goes downhill and they start doing 4-hour blocks of shows and you lose that. I mean, like even the way they were displaying shows, God, on the Sci-Fi Channel, towards like, once you get into the aughts, I mean, it was such a clusterfuck. Like there was they were really playing off the fact that, okay, no, we're going to start reaching out to dumb people and we're not going to play things in a logical progression anymore. And they didn't. They started where they were doing on weekdays. They did this 4-hour block where, one day it would be, Batman 66, the next day maybe it'd be Star Trek, the original series, next day maybe Land of the Giants or something, but you can never really like follow the whole progression. You can never get lost in the universe, which is one of the real appeals, I think, to a lot of very intelligent people, was that they got to enter in many senses another universe when they explored the worlds of science fiction and, in the various mediums of science fiction and fantasy and all of this. So by its very nature, yes, it is attracting stupid people. Really, heavy duty intellectual science fiction is incredibly rare, or nerd stuff is incredibly rare. I think Doctor Who absolutely also fell prey to this, which maybe that's where this question came from, because I was kind of ripping on Doctor Who. I don't remember if it was in a Q&A or if I was doing it on a Sovereign Tech episode proper. But I was ripping on Doctor Who saying, today it's lost its luster. And it's lost it since Eccleston left. And that was in 2005. Because it's not really like, I don't know, it's just not the same. It's really not the same. And I think, Game of Thrones, I don't think Game of Thrones is that intellectual of a show. Yeah, it's high drama, but so what, like a lot of the interesting stuff from it that I like, the Dothraki and all that, they're gone. So I don't give a shit. Like that was the only thing cool in the show. Yes, value is subjective. Of course, I understand that. So I think that's really what happened. Is there was a point where suddenly they saw like this movie that just made a buttload of money. And there was this, also, in fact, I will not mention her name, but the woman who left NBC, and people will know who I'm talking about, but the woman who left NBC and ended up taking over the Sci-Fi Channel made it her mission to have the Sci-Fi Channel reach out to the largest audience possible, to stop appeasing, the nerds, the geeks, the science fiction fans. They wanted to get everybody in there. I mean, you can remember when, and I used to be a fan of wrestling, but even I would tell you at that time that it was ridiculous that ECW, which of course was owned by the WWE at the time, that ECW was on Monday nights on the Sci-Fi Channel. Are you kidding me? Of course, that's when they switched to being SYFY, SYFY, instead of the proper SCI-FI channel, right? So yeah, it just comes down to business interests. And now, and the other thing is that people, I think people have a lot of people have a need for some kind of feeling of belonging, a need for belonging. And that really, I think actually isn't the need. The need is more for understanding. And so I think people feel an appeal to like, oh yeah, I can, I'm a nerd now. So like, I'm in this group, I'm in this subculture and all this stuff, when really like it's so commonplace and it's not really nerd or geek shit anymore, that it's kind of meaningless, but people still kind of attach that. And that gets into the other thing too, as to why there's this inauthenticity. And that is that I think, the entertainment industry as a whole, not just Hollywood, has lost its creativity, and it squeezed the creativity out of itself due to various reasons. Really just people like strangleholding their jobs, and all this. I mean, like there's some directors today, they have no business making a movie anymore. I'll say something that you might think is crazy, but I mean this. Steven Spielberg has no business making movies anymore. He is done. He's been done for a long fucking time. Like pre-AI, he has been done. That's my opinion, but I'm telling you, like he's made shit. He should have, if Steven Spielberg had anything left in him, he should have told George, we're not making Kingdom of the Crystal Skulls until there's a complete fucking rewrite and this movie makes goddamn sense. Fuck that refrigerator. You know what I mean? But these guys have a stranglehold on their job. And so, so Hollywood produces shit. And so their solution to a lack of creativity is to appeal to historicity. I've talked about this before, but it's to appeal to historicity, to say, oh, if we make people think that we're making a movie about something, from 20, 30, 40, 50, who knows, hell, even 100 years ago, then they'll think, oh, this is automatically great because, it's held up over time and because it's this old great story. And, and you can make a making special where you have people talk about, oh, how we did it back in the day and all this shit, right? And so you can kind of create this, it's a marketing ploy, no doubt about it, but you can really create this, kind of this aura, this mystique around the new version of the film, even though really, the original one probably holds up just as well today and could easily be, enjoyed by audiences, but then that doesn't make Hollywood any money. So they're, at least not really, not the kind of money they're looking to get. So, they don't fucking bother with it. I don't agree with, when it comes to a lot of this, especially in the movie scene, I don't agree with the idea that, like, a lot of people will say, like, I listen to Collider sometimes, which is an interesting movie network, and there's great people working over there. I mean, really great people, a lot of great sweaties, John Schnepp, right? John Campia, all those guys are, Christian Harloff, Mark Ellis, they're all great. But I know, in fact, Campia himself will say particularly that, the reason Hollywood keeps making remakes is because people pay for them. I just don't agree with that. I think Hollywood's completely out of ideas. I don't think the money's there. It's not there. People are not paying for this shit. I think that's absolute bullshit. They are not. Hollywood will do whatever it wants. I mean, there's an idea in Hollywood that's called the prestige film. And the prestige film it's a movie that you make. It's kind of an artsy film or it's a pet project, but you're not going to make money on it, but the studio will fund it anyway. It's a very old concept in the movie business. Okay. It's called the prestige film. And I mean, they'll prestige the shit out of all these remakes, just to even like make them still seem like they matter, especially when we're in a world where, a lot of people on YouTube and other venues can make movies that blow away anything Hollywood could dream of doing and are actually original and creative. So I don't agree with that concept that, well, Hollywood keeps making remakes because people keep paying money for it. That's insane. They'd make it anyway, just to kind of puff up, their own faux relevance. So yeah, so much is inauthentic today. I mean, I hate to sound like, I know there's a lot of people who, people have been saying this about various different subjects for probably thousands of years, let alone decades. That, well, things aren't like they used to be, or, people don't know what good really is anymore and all of this. But this is one where I think you have the metrics and you can prove that, no, this has absolutely been dumbed down. It's being designed for the, lowest common denominator. It's not being created to raise up the intellectual level of society. It's being raised to appeal to the most people possible. As to where the other one, I would be like, hell yeah, let's do this. I think Star Trek did that. I think Star Trek raised the intellectual level of humanity. I don't know if you could count the points. I don't believe in the IQ point system. I think that's insane. But it's bullshit science, but just as the example, I think the world is infinitely more intellectual because of Star Trek itself, because, and I've mentioned this before, but it's important to bring it up again. The greatest thing Gene Roddenberry ever said, and how important he was to Star Trek, people can debate and that's fine. Okay. He said that we had an idea when we were making Star Trek that the person on the other side of the screen wasn't stupid. And so what happened is, especially when you got a lot of the kids involved, the kids grew up watching Star Trek, and it just brought everything to another level where they're just like, oh yeah, no, I'm thinking about this. And, and that's another, oh, boy, I could go on forever. Okay. But I don't need to. I want to wrap this one up. Yeah. So the whole nerd geek thing there, honestly, to some degree, there needs to be another term. I'm not being a hipster and saying that. it is absolutely provable that 90%, 99%, whatever metric you want to use, that the majority, how about that? The majority of entertainment, made today is not made to appeal to the intellectual. It is made to appeal to the average. Society as a whole is designed to appeal and work for the average. It is not designed to praise, uplift, or, help out, perhaps, it's not a meritocracy. And if you're intelligent, well, find a nice little niche group, that will hopefully, perhaps support your efforts in all this, and you can all enjoy each other's thoughts in getting intelligent content out there, maybe. But it is absolutely provable. My point, it is absolutely provable today that, all of this stuff that would get classified as nerdy or geeky is being specifically marketed and made to appeal to everybody. In some ways, you could say that that's not a bad thing, but let's be clear that it goes away from sort of that whole, nerd and geek pride in that, oh, I understand this. Oh, you're talking some high level physics there. Awesome. Let's rock and roll with that, right? Not anymore. There's rare cases where you have like The Expanse, which hell, that might, actually that's interesting because the guy who's the head of the Sci-Fi Channel now, after Bonnie, I almost said her name. After she was kicked out, or not kicked out, but after she went on, really to just run NBC as a whole, the guy that came in said, we lost the intelligent people and I want to get them back because we're not going to be able to compete anymore with the thousands of stations that are pulling out all the same bullshit, all the same drama crap that, or comedy crap that the Sci-Fi Channel was trying to mimic, but just putting a little twist on it. The smart people moved on and they're like, no, we've had enough. I know your game. I don't want anything to do with you. And also they're trying to take away the Netflix crowd. Because Netflix is making is taking a lot of risks and making very intelligent, content. And, and like I said, they're taking risks with it and they kind of have the money to do it. And they have the non-regulatory structure, they don't have to deal with a lot of regulations to where they can go forward with that. So now companies are like, oh, fuck, we've got to start appealing to these smart people because they're all running off to Netflix, and there's something there. And so, yeah, so now you're getting things like The Expanse and others. So there might be this pulling back. There might be this going back to perhaps some kind of golden age of, really, really hardcore, geeky, nerdy, very intelligent content. So, but as it stands right now, largely when you go to Comic-Con, you go to SDCC, go to New York Comic-Con or whatever, you are mainly dealing with a lot of people that, this is just for kicks. It's not something they really take that seriously. Or that they've, integrated as part of their whole. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. A lot of, especially like really great science fiction, really, a lot of really great, even great comic books and all this, they had a message, they had a point. There were morality plays that were worth exploring, worth integrating perhaps. I can't tell you how many Kirk monologues I have memorized because they fit. They work. They are a part of my life. One of my favorite ones is from A Taste of Armageddon, where, you have Miniar and Vendikar. You have these two planets at war, and they've made their war into effectively just a, war being fought between computers. And Kirk, spoiler alert, folks, if you haven't seen it since it's been out for 50 fucking years, Kirk at the end of it, he destroys their computers. And says, if you want to do war, you're going to have to do it the old fashioned way because you need to remember. This is the gist of what he says. I could quote verbatim if you really wanted, but his whole point is that when you make war so clean, you just go ahead and do it. But if you remember the horrors of war, of how terrible it really is to take another person's life, then you're going to avoid it at all costs. And that's where, that's where he says, he says to the chancellor there, of Eniar, he says to him, contact Vendikar. You're going to find out that they're just as appalled and horrified, of war, as you are, and they'll do anything to keep it from happening. I mean, like, it's just powerful. And when he goes in and he says, it's like, the guy, the chancellor there is saying, it's like, well, you've admitted it yourselves, we're a killer species, talking about humans in general. And he's like, all right, it's, Kirk says, all right, it's instinctive, but you can stop it. You can fight it. All you have to do is say to yourself, I'm not going to kill today. That's all it takes. So, when you get messages like that, that's so powerful. That's so awesome. And that is totally worth integrating because it's right. It's all, humans aren't an instinctive species. I mean, they are, but they don't have to be. They have consciousness. They have sapience, to where they can move, they can act beyond, these supposed killer instincts and all this, horseshit, which, the origins of them. I mean, that's a whole other debate. That's legit, but it is that simple. The solution is accurate. All you have to do is say to yourself, I'm not going to kill today. Okay, there you go. And then it's done. Just stick to it. But anyway, great question. And it's absolutely true. I think the questioner, read it right, that yes, there is, total lack. It's not that, nerd or geeks is inauthentic and all this stuff. There's this real lack of very intellectual content out there. There's some, but it's really not like back in the day. And there's not that intellectual exchange, I think, that happens because, most people, a lot of people like, I don't know, Battlestar Galactica or something, but you can't really have like that conversation with a lot of people. Well, where you say, well, how do you feel about Starbuck doing this? Or, where do you think the Cylons and, and all that shit? Nobody's really having those kind of conversations. It's just like, oh, that was great. I'm going to eat some more cheese poofs. That's sort of, how that works today. So yeah, it's very legit, but I think, there's some degree of a pullback, of getting back to where there's intellectual content of some kind. Because now, I think the entertainment industry in general has to create things that are going to last. And the only things that ever last are things that you have to keep talking about. And the only way you keep talking about it is if it's really intellectual. It asks a lot. It leaves you with as many questions as it gives you answers as to what's going on. And I think we're going to start approaching, that time frame for that sort of thing to happen. And there's been attempts already. Jupiter Ascending, awesome movie. People hated it. Why? Because they had to think to understand what was going on. Incredible film. The Wachowskis delivered the goods, as kind of as usual. I haven't seen Cloud Atlas, I won't go into Cloud Atlas, but they did an incredible job, and that was an original property and all that. And people are just like, blah, 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 bees. I don't understand because, they don't have brains. They don't understand the symbolism of bees with, royalty and Asenath and all that. So anyway, we'll get this licked. We'll get this solved. Podcasting is actually a solution very much to the lack of intellectual content. As I've said, even on the Q&A episodes, podcasting is it's the new television. It's really the new medium that's coming out there. And the people that are into it now are largely, I think, the intellectuals. They are the people that are thinking, and they recognize it. And that's why they're so hungry and they're so thirsty for more podcasts and podcasting in general, because they recognize that it's giving them something that TV, the movies, even a lot of comic books, not all, but a lot of comic books today just aren't. So there you have it. I think that's enough for this week. Went a little over an hour, a little longer than I wanted, but whatever. So do keep a lookout for that Steam It show. Who knows? Maybe these guys will cream me. I don't think so, but in fact, I can almost guarantee it because I'm fairly certain that my goals in life are different from theirs. And it's just going to come down to the fact that Steam It does, well, first off, the economics I don't think are going to add up. It's going to be interesting to hear them explain that. But also that, the goals are not the same because they're probably trying to reach out to that lowest common denominator, right? And that's not going to last. So anyway, Carpe Lucem, everybody. Woo! I have the last episode of Sex and Science Hour for season 2, and then we're going to take just a couple, 2, 3, I don't know, however many weeks off. That'll be this Friday, and then also a brand new Sovryn Tech, and I've got a doozy after the past couple weeks, and I've gotten a lot of very gracious comments about the last couple episodes, and our listener count has gone up significantly. So we're definitely in the 5-figure range, and I'm happy about that. So Thank you so much for donating through Patreon. Feel free to up your donations if you like. If you enjoy the content, we got a lot more great content, more specials, not just Q&A. We got some exclusive specials that I'm going to be releasing during the next couple of weeks. So, Carpe Lucem, everybody. Woo! I'll see you on the other side.
You just experienced Sovryn Tech. Go to sovryntech.com, that's SOVRYN tech.com, and connect with us there. Find links from today's show and catch our podcast feed. Sovryn Tech is copy heart. Copying art is an act of love, and love is not subject to law. So please share the show however you like. Welcome to the evolution.